Chapter 8. There was bad news on Election Day. Chris Willard was absent. Since there was 12 girls and 12 boys in Mr. Flores' class, that meant there were more girls than boys to vote in the election. If all the girls voted for Cricket and the boys voted for Lucas, there would be a tie. Since one boy was absent, Lucas could be in big trouble. Julio hoped it didn't mean that Lucas had lost the election before they even voted. Then Mr. Flores told the class that the Parent-Teacher Association was going to be holding a book fair in a few weeks. With more than $17 from the bake sale, the class would buy a good supply of paperbacks for a special classroom library. Cricket seemed to think it was a great idea, but Julio didn't think it was so hot. After all, there was a school library one flight of stairs. Why did they need extra books, especially if the books the students had to pay for out of their own money? Julio thought the class should vote on the way the money was spent. Before he had a chance to say anything, it was time for lunch. Lunch was chicken nuggets, whipped potatoes, string beans, and Jell-O squares. Cricket and Zoe didn't even touch their lunches. Julio knew they were talking about the election. Julio clapped Lucas on the back. "You're going to win, pal," he said. "I just know it." He really wasn't so sure, but he felt it was his job to give his candidate confidence. After all, he had convinced Lucas to run for class president in the first place. Lucas shrugged, trying to act cool. "Maybe yes, maybe no," he said. But Julio could see that he was too excited to eat much lunch either. Julio polished off his friend's tuna fish sandwich and his orange. "I need to keep up my strength to vote for you," he told Lucas. Cricket had more chocolate bars. "Are you going to vote for me?" she asked everyone. "Maybe yes, maybe no," said Julio, taking his bar. When they returned from lunch, Mr. Flores called the class to order. It was time for the election to begin. Mr. Flores reminded them about the Roberts Rule of Order, which was the way the school board and other important meetings were conducted. "You may nominate anyone you choose," he said, "even if your candidate doesn't have a poster on the wall. Then you can make a speech in favor of your candidate and try to convince your classmates." "Uh-oh," thought Julio. He was all ready to nominate Lucas, but he didn't know if he could be able to make a speech. He wasn't good with words, as Cricket and Lucas were. Zoe Mitchell raised her hand. "I nominate Cricket Kaufman," she said. No surprise there. Julio wondered if Zoe had wanted to run herself. "Does anyone second the nomination?" Mr. Flores asked. Julio thought the class election sounded like a TV program, not the way people talked in real life. Sarah Jane seconded the nomination. Mr. Flores wrote Cricket's name on the chalkboard. "Are there any other nominations?" he asked. Sarah Jane raised her hand again. "Do you have a question, Sarah Jane?" asked Mr. Flores. "Now I want to nominate Zoe Mitchell." "You can't nominate someone when you have already seconded the nomination of someone else," Mr. Flores explained. "That's the way the parliamentary procedure works." Cricket looked relieved. She hadn't been expecting any competition from Zoe. Julio raised his hand. "I nominate Lucas Cott," he said. "Does anyone second the nomination?" "Can I second it myself?" asked Lucas. "I'll second the nomination," said Anne Crosby from the back of the classroom. "Ooh," giggled one of the girls. "And likes Lucas." There was no rule that girls can nominate only girls and boys nominate boys, said Mr. Flores. He wrote Lucas's name on the board. "Are there any other nominations?" he asked. Arthur Lewis raised his hand. "I want to nominate Julio Sanchez," he said. "Julio?" Sarah Jane giggled. "He's just a big goof-off." "Just a minute," said Mr. Flores sharply. "You are quite out of order, Sarah Jane. Does anyone wish to second the nomination?" Julio couldn't believe that Arthur had nominated him, even though Arthur had said that Julio should run for president. Julio hadn't thought he would come right out and say it in front of everyone. Cricket raised her hand. "Julio can't run for president," she said. "He was born in Puerto Rico. He isn't an American citizen. You have to be an American citizen to be elected president. We learned that last year in social studies." "Yeah," Lucas called out. "You also have to," hold on one second, "be 35 years old. You must have you must have been left out a lot of times, Cricket." "Hold on," said Mr. Flores. "Are we electing a president of the United States here, or are we electing a president of the 5th grade class?" Cricket looked embarrassed. It wasn't often she was wrong about anything. Julio stood up without even raising his hand. He didn't care if he was elected president or not, but there was one thing he had to make clear. "I am so American citizen," he said. "All Puerto Ricans are Americans." Julio sat down, and Arthur raised his hand again. Julio figured he was going to say he had changed his mind and didn't want to nominate him after all. "Arthur?" called Mr. Flores. Arthur stood up. "It doesn't matter where Julio was born," he said. "He'd make a very good class president. He's fair. He's always doing nice things for people. When I broke my glasses, he was the one who thought of going to Mr. Herbertson so that we could still play soccer at recess. That shows he would make a good president." There's a picture also. Well, let's see, this way. But Julio is not one of the top students like Zoe or Lucas or me, Cricket said. "He is tops," said Arthur. "He's tops in my book." Julio felt his ears getting red with embarrassment. He had never heard Arthur say so much in all the years that he had known him. "Thank you, Arthur," said Mr. Flores. "That was a very good speech. We still need to hear someone to second the nomination. Do I hear a second?" Lucas raised his hand. "I second the nomination of Julio Sanchez," he said. Mr. Flores turned to write Julio's name on the board. Lucas was still raising his hand. Mr. Flores turned from the board and called on Lucas again. "Do you wish to make a campaign speech?" he asked Lucas. "Yes. I'm going to vote for Julio, and I think everyone else should too." "Aren't you even going to vote yourself?" asked Cricket. "No," said Lucas. "I want to take my name off the board. Julio's a good leader, like Arthur said." When we went to Mr. Herbertson, Cricket and I were scared stiff, but Julio just stepped in and did all the talking. "Are you asking to withdraw your name from the nomination, Lucas?" asked Mr. Flores. "Yes, I am. Everyone who is going to vote for me should vote for Julio." Julio sat in his seat without moving. He couldn't say a word. He could hardly breathe. "Are there any other nominations?" asked Mr. Flores. Zoe raised her hand. I move that the nominations be closed. I second it, said Lucas. Then Mr. Flores asked the two candidates if they wanted to say anything to the class. Cricket stood up. As you know, she said, I am going to run for president of the United States someday. Being class president will be good practice for me. Besides, I know I will do a much, much better job than Julio. Cricket sat down. Julio stood. I might vote for Cricket when she runs for president of the United States, he said. But right now, I hope you will vote for me. I think our class should make decisions together, like how we should spend our money that we earned at the bake sale. We should spend the money in the way that everyone likes, not just the teacher. Julio stopped and looked at Mr. Flores. That's how I feel, he said. If I'm president, said Cricket, I think the money should go to the Humane Society. You shouldn't tell us what to do with the money either, said Julio. It should be a class decision. We all help to earn it. Julio has made a good point, said Mr. Flores. I guess we can vote on that in the future. Mr. Flores passed out the ballots. Julio was sure he knew the results even before the votes were counted. With one boy absent, Cricket would win, 12-11. Julio was right, and he was wrong. All the boys voted for him, but so did some of the girls. When the votes were counted, they were 14 for Julio and 9 for Cricket Kaufman. Julio Sanchez was elected elected president of the 5th grade class. I think you have made a good choice, said Mr. Flores. And I know that Cricket will be a very fine vice president. Julio beamed. Suddenly, he was filled with all sorts of plans for his class. Mr. Flores took out the guitar. As he had said, they were going to end each week with some singing. Julio thought he had never felt so much singing in all his life. However, even as he joined the class in the words to the song, he wished it was already time to go home. He could hardly wait to tell his family the news. Wait till he told them who was the 5th grade class president. Julio, that's who. At 3 o'clock, he ran all the way home. The end. Hope you liked it.